In this course, we are going to deal with syntax. I'm going to cover general rule of phrases. Different phrases will be covered for this session: noun phrases, prepositional phrase, recursion, verb phrase, sentence, and conjunction. And also, we are going to have a look at 4 examples of the phrase structure rules, like lexical rules, movement rules, complement phrases, transformational rules, and then we will end up with an exercise. Now, to start with, I would like to notice that language faculty, how do human beings come up with this capacity to speak and to speak a language, to formulate sentences in a language, and to express meaning in a language. Of course, when we speak about language faculty, this language faculty includes knowledge about the sound system of this language, knowledge about how to formulate words, and then to go into strings of words and sentences. And from that, you go into making meaning and expressing things with language. In here, we are concerned in this session with the part of syntax. Now, if you look at syntax, it is concerned with the form, and as a definition of syntax, we've seen that in the previous session. It is considered as the scientific study of how to form sentences. Now, what does this mean? How can we formulate sentences based on what? So usually we formulate sentences based on structure rules. And when I say structure rules, we need to think about language as hierarchy of constituents, as a hierarchy of different words that go into larger units. Now, if you look at the diagram here, you have every word belongs to a lexical category. Every word belongs to a lexical category. And what we mean here by a lexical category, we refer, for example, to words like man, woman as nouns, but we refer to words like the, and an as determiners. We refer, for example, to words like book, look, and see as nouns and verbs, which means that each word we come up with has a specific lexical category, which forms, and by themselves, these lexical categories, they formulate or they form heads of phrases. Now, you know that heads of phrases, and we can provide here examples like a verb phrase, جملة فعلية, or a noun phrase, جملة اسمية, or a prepositional phrase, and so on. So which means that we go from the level of the word or the node, we can also call it the node, into a string of words, into a constituent. And then from there, from constituents, from a group of words into what we call a sentence or a phrase. How phrases are formed is governed by phrase structure. So the way we formulate phrases, the way we put them together, follows a specific order, but also follows a specific structure rules. Now, phrase structure rules determine 2 things. They determine what goes into a phrase, which means what are the words, the different lexical categories that go into a phrase, but also how do we organize those lexical categories? How do we put them together in order for them to be considered as a constituent? And if you remember, in the previous episode, we have defined the constituents as a set of words or a string of words that constitute one unit. And we have said that constituents, in order to see if a string of words constitute a unit, there are multiple ways we can figure out this by using constituency tests, and we talked about this previously. The second the second thing that the phrase structure rules determine is how constituents are ordered. So the way we put words together, what kind, of structure and order they follow, is also something that is determined by grammar, by structure rules and grammatical rules. A constituent in that case would be defined as a word or a group of words that function as a unit and can make up larger grammatical units. Now, and here I can come up with an example. We can speak about, for example, the nice car. The nice car. You know that the is a determiner, nice is a noun, and car is an adjective, and car is a noun. During constituency, we wondered if the nice and car and they constitute a constituency, meaning whether they formulate one unit or not. And as we said, the best way to do this is via the constituency test. Or another way is to draw trees. Now, in fact, this is what we are going to have a look at. How can we know of different constituents in a sentence, and whether a string of words constitute a string of words or constitute one unit? And we are going to explain this notion here. Now, if you look at here, at the top, you have here a sentence or a TP, a tense phrase. Sometimes in some references it is referred to, a sentence is referred to as a TP, which means a tense phrase. And usually sentences, they can be broken up or divided into an NP and a VP. NP stands for a noun phrase and VP stands for a verb phrase. Now, what about an NP? Usually an NP is a constituent that breaks down into a determiner and a noun. Okay? And a VP, usually also it is another constituent. It is another constituent that can be divided into a verb and a noun phrase. And of course, you know that a noun phrase can be also branched into or divided into a determiner and a noun. Sometimes we can have an adjective in between the determiner and the noun, and we are going to come up to these certain exceptions and rules. Now, if we go further, let's have a look at a determiner. We can have different examples of determiners. We can have the lexical item the, these are determiners, examples of determiners. You can take any determiner you want, that, this, and so on. Also, we can take another example of nouns like man and letter. Okay, these are examples of nouns. And we go into the verb. A verb like, for example, wrote. Okay, out of these lexical items, we are going to try to draw a tree. Okay, to draw a tree. And what we can say here is that constituents build up into each other to make sentences. Now remember, what did we say about constituents? So usually when we are going to, especially when we draw trees, we are going to see exactly this kind of hierarchy of constituents, which means that we go from the larger hierarchy from the top, which is the sentence, into NP and VP, which break also down into smaller units. Okay, now there is a certain specific terminology for these words that we are going to have a look at. Now, if you look at this example of tree, we have a sentence, okay? And usually the sentence, the S, sometimes in some references, as I said, they refer to it as TP, tense phrase. The sentence is called or labeled the root node. This is what we call the root node. It's the mother, okay? It's the mother node. And this mother node has or is broken and branched into two things, which is the NP and is branched into the NP and also the VP. Sorry for this. So the NP and the VP are called terminal, non-terminal nodes. Now the NP and VP are called non-terminal nodes, the ones in red. If you go further down, NP is broken and branched into a determiner and a noun. The determiner stands for the lexical item the, and the noun refers to man. If we go to the node, to the non-terminal node, which is the VP, in VP we find a verb and a noun phrase. The verb is wrote and the noun phrase is broken down into a determiner and a noun. The determiner is the article the, and the noun is the letter. Now, by looking at this tree, we know that, or we notice that syntax is not flat. It is not, but it's rather hierarchical in its organization. Now, if you look at sentence includes NP and VP. NP includes a determiner and a noun, and VP includes other nodes. And the last nodes where we end up are called terminal nodes, which means that if we take the example of the man, these are two nodes, two terminal nodes, which constitute one set, which constitute one constituent. So why they are constituting one constituent? It's simply because they give rise, if you go up, they give rise, or they are coming from one mother. They are coming from one mother, their mother, or they're coming from one unit, which is the NP. The same goes for wrote the letter. If you take wrote the letter, the verb plus the NP, all this can be considered as one constituent. Why? Simply because they are coming, or they give rise to one unit, which is the VP. Again, we have another constituent in this sentence, which is the letter. The letter is an NP. We have a determiner and a noun, and this set of nodes, these two terminal nodes, they give rise to the NP, and that's why we can consider them as a constituent. I hope this is clear about constituents. Now let's move on to a general rule of phrases. Now here you have, as you can see, we have an XP. And here X stands for any type of phrase. Any type of phrase you take, all phrases are constituted of a specifier and a complement. Now, X is, for example, let's take the example of a verb phrase. A verb phrase would constitute a specifier, something that specifies the verb itself. Okay, X, if we have here a VP, then here it will be the head of the phrase will be the verb. If we have a noun phrase, then the head of the verb will be a noun. Okay, if we have a prepositional phrase, then the head of the phrase will be a preposition. Now, all these types of phrases, they have a head, which is the X, referred to as X, and they have a specifier which comes before the head, and a complement which comes after the head. Now, this is a general rule that goes for everything. I mean, we are going to see later. Now, if you take this example here, we have a verb phrase, okay? A verb phrase which is happily sent the email. Happily sent the email. This verb phrase is divided into an adverb, which is happily. Normally, it's considered as an adverb phrase, and if we refer to it as adverb, then we can make a triangle like this. And then the VP, the head of this verb phrase, is the verb which is sent, and then the email is the NP. It can be also divided into or branched into a determiner, which is the, and the noun, which refers to email. Now, sent, the verb sent, is the head of the phrase. Happily is the specifier of the verb. What does it mean? It specifies the verb. It specifies the verb. It means, how did he send? Someone sends an email. I'm questioning here, or I'm giving an information about the action itself. The action itself and how was it done. Okay, so happily specifies how the action has been done. The complement is a bit different, and it comes different in order, but also different in function, which means I sent what? Which means that the sentence would be considered as incomplete without a complement, especially if the verb is transitive. Okay. Okay, so if we go back to the general rule of phrases, which is XP consists of a specifier, and specifier, please bear in mind here that it is put between brackets, and we have X, and then also between brackets complements. What do we mean by these brackets? It means that a specifier and a complement can be optional. In many cases, we can have an XP. Let's take the example here of the VP. We can have only a verb without any kind of adverb or any kind of complement, especially if the verb is intransitive. So which means that any type of phrase in this way, any type of phrase, which means whether it's a V or a prepositional phrase or a noun phrase, should have this kind of format, this kind of template. So it is considered as a general phrase. It's a blueprint that shows us the construction of a specific phrase. Now, in order to form a phrase, as I said, there are optional items or nodes and there are obligatory nodes. Usually the head of the phrase is obligatory. If we are talking about a verb phrase, then the head of the phrase, which is the verb, is obligatory, but the specifier and the complement is not. If we take another example like a prepositional phrase, then of course the preposition and the noun are obligatory. But in between the preposition and the noun, we might have an optional adjective, for example, and we will come to examples of this. Now let's move on to phrase structure rules, and specifically we are going to have a look at noun phrases. Look at the examples on the left screen. We have the first example, John. John is a noun, so we have one word. The second, the boy, two words which constitute a determiner and a noun, the boy. The third example, a little boy. A little boy, a determiner, then an adjective, and then we have a noun. And the last example is a boy in a bubble. We have a boy, a determiner, boy is a noun, in is a prepositional phrase. Now all these examples, if you look at these examples very, very well, then you are going to see that all of them, they constitute noun phrases. Despite their complexity, now we go from one word into a string of words, but all of these examples, they represent what we call noun phrases, even if we have some of them are more complex than others. Also, you can find out that these form one constituent if you use a substitution test. For example, when you say a boy in a bubble, this string of words constitute one constituent. I mean, it can be considered as one constituent, and the constituent is the NP. Now, if you look at the phrase structure rule for NPs, what kind of rule do we have or can we make out of these examples? And of course, bear in mind that this description of rule is only descriptive and never and not prescriptive, which means that this is the way we understand in a simplified way how people speak in real language. Now, an NP, in order to formulate a noun phrase, the head of the phrase, which is the noun, is obligatory, but the determiner, the adjective, and the prepositional phrase, these are optional things within the NP. Now, as you see, all the elements, all the nodes, or all the categories referred to or put within brackets are considered optional. Now, if you look at the diagram tree for NPs, you have an NP that breaks down into a noun, which is John. We have also an NP breaks down into a determiner, the, and a noun, boy. The third one, an NP, constitutes of a determiner. In between we have an adjective, which is little, and a noun, which is boy. The last example, this is the representation in a tree. We have an NP, which breaks into a determiner, which stands for a noun, which stands for boy, and the prepositional phrase, which stands for a preposition and an NP. And here, if you look at prepositional phrase, it's a constituent, and also it's another type of phrase that comes within the noun phrase. So you see, which means that's why we consider language as a hierarchy of constituents, which means within the constituents of the noun phrase, we have another constituent which is a prepositional phrase. Of course, the head of the prepositional phrase is the preposition, which is in, and it has another specifier, if we say, or another complement, which is a determiner and a bubble. Okay, the bubble, the determiner and the noun. Let's move on to another type of phrases, which is prepositional phrase. In the prepositional phrase, we have here in is a preposition, from a boy in a bubble, from a boy in a bubble. So from is a preposition and a boy is an NP, and we have then in a bubble is another preposition, and then a bubble is another NP that comes within the main prepositional phrase. Now, what kind of rule we can get from that? The general rule for prepositional phrases is that usually a prepositional phrase should consist of an obligatory head, which is the preposition, and an NP. Okay, it needs an optional NP. Let's see the example here. A prepositional phrase constitutes of a preposition, which is from, and an NP, which is a boy. Okay, a is a determiner and boy is a noun. Again, this, we are going to see it in recursion as well. Here a PP comes as another constituent under the noun phrase, and PP breaks into a preposition, which is in, and a noun phrase which breaks into a determiner, a, and another noun, which is bubble. I hope this is clear. Let's move on to recursion. And what do we mean by recursion? Recursion is a feature of rules of grammar which allows us to apply rules repetitively to generate infinite number of structures. Recursion is being repetitive. You repeat the same structure. Example of a prepositional phrase recursion. Now, the cats on the mat, in the house, on the street. Now, all these phrases are prepositional phrases. So language allows us to use this recursion in order to have an endless and infinite way to express different things. Now, what is the rule for this type of phrase when we have recursion of a specific type of phrase? Now, here we have the example of recursion of a prepositional phrase. In general, prepositional phrases, when we have recursion, it means that, or it will consist of a preposition, which is the head, and it's obligatory, plus an article. It might be an article, optional, a noun phrase, optional, and then a preposition, then an article, and then NP, and it goes endlessly. It should be noted here that all prepositional phrases are embedded under NPs. Okay, now if you look at the NP, we will start by the cat on the mat. So the cat needs a complement, needs a complement, and the complement of the cat, um, which gives extra meaning to what do we want to say. So the cat on the mat, in the house, on the street. So it's an NP. The main constituent is an NP, which breaks into a determiner, which is the, a noun, which is cat, and a prepositional phrase, which is divided by itself on a preposition, which is on, and then NP divided into the determiner, and mat, the noun, and another PP, and the branching goes on by having all prepositional phrases are embedded under noun phrases. I hope this is clear. Let's move on to verb phrases. In verb phrases here, we have some of these examples. We can take the example of a phrase which is a verb phrase constituted only of one constituent or one word, which is sung. It's a verb. Then we have ate the cake. So ate the cake, we have a verb plus NP. And then we have ate the cake hungrily. It's a verb plus NP and an adverb. Then we have sung a song in the shower. So sung a song in the shower. So here we have a verb, an NP, and the prepositional phrase. Then fell into the pond slowly. We have here the verb, the prepositional phrase, and the adverb. The type of rule that we can make here about the making of verb phrases. So usually verb phrases, they must constitute an obligatory head, which is the verb, but all the other constituents are optional. We can have an example of a noun phrase. We can have a prepositional phrase, and also we can have an adverb. So all these, they add to the variety of sentences that we can make out of verb phrases. Let's have a look at the tree for the verb phrases. We have sung. So sung is a category which stands for verb, which rises into the category of VP, a verb phrase. Also, we can go from the top to down. A verb phrase is branched into a verb and an NP. The verb is ate, and the NP stands for the cake. Ate the cake. It's a determiner and a noun. Another example, the third one, we have a verb phrase, sung a song in the shower. Sung a song in the shower. Badly. So we have another adverb there. So we have sung is a verb which rises to a VP. And also we have a song. A song is a determiner and a noun. In the shower is a preposition. In the shower is a preposition and NP. So the NP is constituted of a determiner and a noun. And badly is an adverb. So badly is the terminal node that rises into the VP. Now, what is a sentence? What kind of rule we can have for the largest constituent, which is the sentence? A sentence consists of an NP and a VP. So usually a sentence breaks into NP and VP. Like, for example, we have the dog barked. The dog is the subject and the predicate is barked, the verb, the action which takes place. So barked is the VP. The dog is the NP. Barked is the VP. The dog will bark. In this case, when we include in the sentence a model like will, which indicates the future, how are we going to represent that in a tree? And this is an example of how we are going to put that. So usually a sentence breaks into an NP and a VP. And if you notice here, both NP and VP are obligatory constituents within a sentence. And also, there is an optional constituent, which is the auxiliary. And under auxiliary, we can include also models. Let's take the two examples there. The dog ate the bone. The dog will eat the bone. The first three of the sentence, of the first sentence, we have the dog ate the bone. So we're going to start with sentence, which breaks into an NP. The NP constitutes a determiner, which is the, and the noun, which is the dog. And the VP breaks into a verb ate, and then NP, which breaks into a determiner the, and the noun bone. I hope you are following with me. Okay, so the second example is we have a sentence which breaks into three elements, three constituents. The first constituent is the NP, which breaks into a determiner and a noun, the dog. And the second constituent is in the middle, comes in as an auxiliary, which is will. And the third one is the VP, which can be broken down into eat, the verb, and NP, a determiner, and the noun, which is the bone. Now, with conjunction. Conjunction are words and phrases of the same category. Parallel structures can be combined using conjunctions like and, but, or. For example, the cat and the dog. So here we have parallel structure by using the same structure. The cat is an NP. When I use a conjunction and, I'm going to keep the same structure, which means that I'm going to have the repetition or to repeat an NP. Another example, I bought a book, but I returned it. I bought a book, this is a sentence. When I use but, which is a conjunction, I need to repeat the same structure. Okay, so here we have the repetition of the same structure. A general rule of this can be X consists of X, conjunction, then X. Examples of these, X stands for any type of phrase. Let's take the example of a noun phrase. If we have a noun phrase, then I can make a conjunction of two noun phrases. Then for verb phrases, I can have in the first place a verb phrase, then I can insert a conjunction like and, but, or, and repeat the same structure, which is the verb phrase. or we can have also the repetition or the conjunction of two sentences. Uh, let's look at the example or the tree there. So you have the cat and the dog. Here we have the conjunction of two noun phrases. As you see, conjunction comes in the middle as conjunction. Okay, we refer to it with this abbreviation. And NP at both parallel nodes. NP stands for a determiner and a noun for the cat, and a determiner and a noun for the dog. Also, we can make a conjunction that links two sentences together. For example, I bought a book is linked to somehow was related to I returned it. Now we come here to some of the phrase structure rules. Phrase structure rules, in this way, we can say that not only in syntax, we do not only rely on these phrase structure rules, but there are certain lexical rules that allow us to judge whether a sentence is grammatical or ungrammatical. Phrase structure rules generate structures. In order to turn structures into recognizable English, we also need lexical rules, knowledge about the meaning of the words. Now, for example, we have personal pronouns or personal nouns like Mary and George. So we know that Mary and George are personal nouns. And also when we come to the word or to the lexis, girl, dog, boy, we notice that these are nouns and stand for nouns. Also we have a and the. They stand for articles. And pronouns like it and you. We have also verbs like followed and saw, and adjectives like small and crazy, and so on. Now the question we need to ask, why do we care about lexical rules in syntax? Now to answer this question, look at the example we have below. We have below the example, Mary helped George. By looking at this example, we say that it's correct, it's grammatical, and it's meaningful. Not only it is grammatical and syntactically correct, I mean the order of the words is correct. Mary is the subject, helped is the action which is taking place, and the one who benefits from the action is George. The second example is the helped you. Now, the helped you, from this sentence we notice that it is ungrammatical. Now, how did we know that this is ungrammatical? How did we judge this? Is it based on the word order or based on another type of rule? Of course, this is based on another type of rule. Because what we know about the is a determiner. But where is it positioned there? It is positioned in the place of the subject. Is it possible to have a determiner in the subject position? Of course no. So which means that lexical items, all the lexical items that we have talked about, they have specific positions syntactically. We do not accept that determiners can make subjects. So this is how we judged that the second sentence is ungrammatical. So finally, we can say that lexical rules make us know about sentence grammaticality, as we said. Now we are going to have a look at very briefly at movement, some of the movement rules, and we are going to have an example which shows this. Usually movement rules is referred to with the symbol here that you see on the top. So movement rules refers to the movement of the subject verb inversion to make an interrogative form. So movement rules, they refer to the subject's verb inversion. Okay. Example, we have there a sentence consists of a noun phrase, an auxiliary, and a verb phrase. An auxiliary consists of can, could, will, or would. I mean, we can choose only one of these. Usually auxiliaries, they are modals or the verb to be, or modals in general. And the verb is like follow, help, and see. The interrogative form is derived from the declarative form. An example, you will help Mary. You will help Mary. This is a declarative sentence. To move into the interrogative sentence, we are going to say, will you help Mary? Now, what happens at the level of the constituents and the order of the constituent? Is there any kind of change in the order? Of course, this is what we are going to see. Now, syntactically, when you draw a hierarchical organization of this sentence, it will be very clear that in a declarative sentence, the sentence breaks into a noun phrase, an auxiliary in the middle, and a verb phrase at the end. But in an interrogative question, we are going to see that the auxiliary that should be in the middle makes its movement into the beginning of the phrase and into, it moves before the noun phrase. And we will get then a sentence consists of an auxiliary, then an NP, then a VP. So whenever we see auxiliary before the NP and the VP, we will know that this is a question, an interrogative form. Now we have come to an application exercise. I would like you to draw a diagram tree for the following three sentences. I talked to her briefly. Shall I open the window? I read the letter, but I couldn't understand it. So please do these trees and share them in the Facebook group. I'll be waiting for your responses on these three, and we will continue the discussion via Facebook. But before doing these trees, have a look please at those different tips for drawing trees. So always start with the word classes at the bottom. So you need to, when you draw trees, you start from the bottom, you put your sentence at the bottom, then you go to the top again, you go to the top and you start with your main constituent, which is the sentence, okay, at the top. And usually the sentence is branched into an NP on left and a VP on the right. So usually these are all sentences that do not go beyond this structure rule. The third tip is that you need to identify the other phrase types. After that, you need to identify if you have NPs, VPs, prepositional phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, and complement phrase. And after that, you label each node in the diagram. And this is the last terminal node, as we've seen in the terminology specific to this course.